Hey, welcome back to the Michael Lofton show here on Reason and Theology. I want to offer a presentation on how this Pachamama scandal really came about in the news. Um, the presentation that I'm offering is called Pachamama Worship in the Vatican, an artificial scandal, where I want to demonstrate that this was just that. It was an artificial scandal created by news. Um, and so I'm going to document this at length. Let me go ahead and start by sharing my presentation here. Oh, but let me say this. One of the reasons why I'm doing this is, oddly enough, even though, I've already done multiple shows kind of demonstrating that this whole thing was made up and poking holes in the narrative, I still continue to get, to this day, for the year 2023, the number one comment that I get from people in the comment section is, but what about Pachamama? Anything that I say vindicating the Catholic magisterium or poking holes in the narrative, every single time the response is, but what about Pachamama? So I think it's important that we kind of look through the history of how this developed in the news. So I want to go ahead and share my screen, and let's dive in because we have a lot of ground to cover here. Okay, there we go. All right. Let's see. Let me actually do it this way. There we go. All right, Pachamama worship in the Vatican, an artificial scandal. Let me give you an outline. The lead up before the Synod, we're going to take a look at that. The Vatican Garden Ceremony itself, which was October 4th, 2019. This is the event that a lot of people want to say was the moment where the Pope or Pachamama was worshipped in the Vatican. The Vatican Garden Ceremony in the media. We're going to take a look at that as well. And then unofficial Vatican explanations about the image and the ceremony. We're going to take a look at the image thrown into the Tiber and that whole situation. After that, we will take a look at Pope Francis's comments on the situation. And by the way, I will have this PowerPoint available at reasonandtheology.com. As soon as this stream is done, I'll create an article with the PowerPoint embedded in it. So if you want to take a look at the outline and presentation and even go to the hyperlinks in it, you're welcome to do so. So yes, it will be available. Okay. All right. And then also we're going to take a look at the prayer from the Missio Foundation, controversial prayer, condemnations of Vatican idolatry by various Catholic figures. We're going to talk a little bit about Taylor Marshall's involvement as well. And then I'm going to give you a summary and a conclusion after that. Okay, let me give you one brief caveat. However, this is not an exhaustive treatment of the Vatican Garden Ceremony in the news, either secular or ecclesial. It's not exhaustive because, frankly, I don't know if it's humanly possible to document every single article that was made about it, but I'll try to give the highlights and overall trends the best that I could tell. I certainly welcome any corrections from anyone. So if there's any misinformation or misunderstandings on my part, I'm welcome to correct. I'm willing to correct those, and I welcome your corrections in the comment section. Okay, so let's talk about the lead up before the Synod. Before the Synod on the Amazon, which again coincided with this whole ceremony that is in question in relation to whether or not Pachamama was worshipped. The ceremony was just 2 days before the Synod took place, the Synod in Rome on the Amazon. There had been a lot of things going on in the lead up. I mean, as you probably can tell by now, every single Synod we have, There's a whole bunch of Catholic media coverage prior to that saying, hey, get ready. They're going to introduce women priests. They're going to bless gay unions. They're going to teach this and that heresy, this and that paganism. And you have that every single synod. The Catholic media is just throwing all these claims out there. Well, that was also the case in 2016, as I will briefly demonstrate here. As early as June 18th, 2019, some were accusing the Synod of serving neo-paganism. Now, remember, again, the ceremony itself, October 4th, 2019, so already in June, and this isn't the first instance, but already we're seeing claims that, hey, these guys in the Synod, they're promoting some form of paganism. Okay, so that's already in the air that everyone is breathing prior to this whole situation. Here's one quote. The working document for the upcoming Synod of Bishops on the Amazon region represents a total opening of the gates of the magisterium to Indian theology and eco-theology, which includes clearly pagan and pantheistic elements of belief. A Chilean author said, Jose Antonio Ureta of the Plinio Correa de Oliveira Institute, part of the Tradition, Family, and Property movement. You'll recall this is the same movement that was also circulating propaganda very recently prior to this current synod, the Synod of Bishops. Founded by the eponymous Catholic thinker, said the new document opens the church up to these two ideologies, which are two Latin American derivatives of liberation theology. This is something that you can find on Inward Penance website. Okay, so we're already seeing claims of neo-paganism. That's in the air. September 5th, 2019, again, still prior to the event, LifeSiteNews accused the Synod of heresy. There's a little typo there. I'll need to fix that. Not was accused, but accused the Synod of heresy. It notes how the condemned heresy of modernism has infiltrated the Amazon Synod. That's the name of the article that they discussed. Okay, so we're hearing accusations of heresy, paganism. On September 12, 2019, Cardinal Burke and Bishop Schneider. Now, I mentioned Cardinal Burke. Note I put 2016 dubia and 2023 dubia. I mentioned this because Cardinal Burke, prior to the Synod on the Family, had this whole controversy that was created in the media with his dubia. There was that whole controversy that was created due to him releasing that dubia before Pope Francis even received the dubia. Then again, during this synod, the Synod of the Amazon, there was Cardinal Burke right there stirring things up, saying, hey, be careful, there's heresy here, as we'll see in a moment. And then also, again, most recently with the current synod on the Synod on Synodality, once again drops another dubia 2 days before the synod, creating a massive controversy, a massive scandal, artificially created in relation to blessing homosexual unions. So we see a pattern here with some of these guys. They're involved with every one of these synods right around the time of the synod. They derail it with all kinds of shenanigans in the news. Okay, so Cardinal Burke, and also Bishop Schneider, who was, again, the signer of the 2022 document accusing the papal magisterium of teaching heresy and Desiderio Desideravi. So problematic figure. As early as 2019, both of them announce a crusade of prayer against the heresies of the Amazonian Synod. The Synod hasn't even started yet, but they're announcing prayers against the heresies of it because of its working document. Cardinal Raymond Burke and Bishop Athanasius Schneider have issued an 8-page declaration warning against 6 serious theological errors and heresies they say are contained in the Amazonian Synod working document, and calling for prayer and fasting to prevent them from being approved. Okay, so we see that as well. Let's continue here. On October 4th, 2019. So now this is the day of the ceremony, D-Day. Okay. On that day, you have various Catholic content creators and media figures gathered in Rome for a conference called Our Church, Reformed or Deformed? It included Michael Voris, John Henry Weston from LifeSiteNews, Michael Matt from The Remnant, Taylor Marshall, and others gathered at this conference. And at the conference, they were sounding the alarm against Pope Francis and the Synod. Voris even called for the Pope to resign. Others were just, very, very concerned about what is taking place in the Catholic Church. So you have people already meeting in Rome, media figures who are expecting something, anticipating something, worried about something. And in fact, I have a link to the full video. You're welcome to go and watch it at your own leisure. Okay, still more on the lead up. On September 28th, 2019, various priests gather near Castel Sant'Angelo with the intention of expelling diabolical influence from the Vatican, especially in view of the Amazon Synod. Laity also gathered to pray the rosary for the same intention. John Henry Weston and Michael Matt were in attendance. So you have a whole bunch of laity gathered right there in Rome, praying the rosary against the heresies of the Amazon Synod. And you even have some priests there gathering together to not only pray against it, but they are also doing exorcisms against the Vatican in view of the Amazon Synod. Again, all of this is in the atmosphere prior to the event. So this is the climate. Now, here's a quote from what LifeSiteNews posted on this. It's funny how they always create these little protests and gatherings and rosary rallies and then document it and promote it all over. Okay, so here we go. Standing at the foot of Castel Sant'Angelo on the eve of the liturgical feast of St. Michael the Archangel, the International Lay Coalition launched an appeal to the angels against the evil spirits ahead of the Amazonian Synod being held at the Vatican October 6th to the 27th. LifeSite has learned that another act of spiritual warfare was taking place in Rome contemporaneously with the I don't know the name of that organization, so how to pronounce it properly. At the 3:30 p.m., priests privately prayed Pope Leo XIII's prayer of exorcism, the longer prayer to St. Michael, in a church near Castel Sant'Angelo with the intention of expelling the diabolical influence from the Vatican, especially in view of the Amazon Synod. Again, this is the climate. This is what's in the air. They're ready for something. They're praying against the demonic. They're anticipating something really bad. Okay. Also, leading up, you have Cardinal Walter Brandmuller, again, signer of the 2016 dubia and that whole fiasco. Currently, at this time, with this synod, also stirring the pot. And by the way, he's also one of the 2023 dubia signers with that whole fiasco. Again, we're seeing a pattern here with specifically Cardinal Mueller, Cardinal Brandmuller, and also Cardinal Burke, with every synod derailing it and stirring the pot. Okay. Now, he notes this: the preparatory documents for the synod have drawn both controversy and criticism from cardinals and bishops of the Catholic Church. German Cardinal Walter Brandmuller openly saying it contains heresy and approaches apostasy. So the working document of the Amazon Synod contains heresy and it's approaching apostasy. Again, this is all in the climate. Okay, so now whenever you have this thing appear in a climate where everybody is concerned about paganism, heresy, apostasy, the work of the devil, here we go. Let's talk about the Vatican Garden Ceremony itself. On October 4th, 2019, the Vatican held a ceremony for St. Francis 2 days before the Amazon Synod began. Now, note that it's 2 days before the beginning of the Synod because I just have to throw out and point out that it was also 2 days before the Synod on synodality that Cardinal Burke and others dropped their most recent dubia controversy. Just pointing that one out, that was also literally 2 days before this. That's it. Again, I think we're seeing a pattern here. In this ceremony, it honored Our Lady of the Amazon. The actual ceremony itself calls the image here Nuestra Señora de la Amazonia. And you can see that in this video at the 13-minute 27 timestamp. I have shown it so many times on this video that I'm not going to go through it again. That's established fact. In fact, nobody at this point actually disputes that the video and the ceremony itself calls it Our Lady of the Amazon. You know, friend or foe, critic or not, everybody already agrees. Yeah, okay. At the ceremony, they call it Our Lady of the Amazon. So that point is really uncontested at this point. At the time, however, that was often overlooked. Okay. But I do have a link to it, and again, refer you to the timestamp. Okay. All right. Now, Father Deacon Dragani and I, after the fact, way after the fact, several years after the fact, did a video where Father Deacon Dragani went over the ceremony in detail, step by step, a whole play-by-play analysis of the ceremony. We show you the whole video. We pause the video at each step and we explain it to you, who this person is, what they're doing, are they Catholic, what this ceremony is, what this chant is, what this song is, what this symbolism means, and so on. We do all of that, so I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here. I've already shown this over 5 times on my channel, so I'm not going to make y'all sit through it again. I'll just refer you to the video if you have not seen it already. It's called The Truth About the Pachamama Vatican Ceremony. There's the thumbnail to it. There's a link to it. You're welcome to go and watch it. In fact, I think it's crucial that you watch it in conjunction with this video, because it establishes conclusively the participants were all Catholic. None of the songs were pagan. None of the prayers were pagan. All of the gestures were Catholic. There was no specific veneration to the image in question. The image was identified as Our Lady of the Amazon during the ceremony, and it was placed next to another image that represented Elizabeth, which is, again, the visitation in the Gospels. And also, we established there were other things in the circle, along with the Virgin Mary and Elizabeth, including an image depicting Christian martyrs. So there was all kinds of stuff there. Okay. Now, one of the first reports that we see about this, on the day of the ceremony, October 4th, 2019, so the day of the ceremony, D-Day, we're getting news reports. CNA notes the Vatican was not involved in the organization of the ceremony. That's important. Take note of that. The ceremony was not organized by the Vatican. It was organized by other groups out there. But it was not them. Repam, I believe, was one of the groups, but it wasn't the Vatican specifically. It notes a representative from the Vatican Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development said after the event that the Dicastery's officials were invited to attend the event, but neither organized nor promoted it. Now, CNA notes the image reportedly represents the Virgin Mary. Notice the word there, reportedly. But in fact, it's not just reportedly, it was in the video itself at the 13-minute 27 timestamp. So there should have been no reportedly here. It should have been very clearly promoted or explained by CNA that the ceremony itself calls it Our Lady of the Amazon. Already we're fumbling here in the news. Right at the out of the gate. Reportedly represents the Virgin Mary, but then it notes participants sang and held hands while dancing in a circle around the images in a dance resembling the pago a la tierra, a traditional offering to Mother Earth common among indigenous peoples in some parts of South America. No explanation was provided by the event organizers as to why the dance was performed for the feast of St. Francis or what it symbolized. Now, notice here, they're just throwing out the claim that it resembles this offering to Mother Earth. And of course, everybody's going to read that as, okay, well, there's this pagan ceremony that is taking place in the Vatican. You know, no evidence for this. It's just throwing out that, hey, it resembles this thing. So again, note CNA made this claim without offering any evidence. And then I will encourage you to compare the Vatican ceremony with a real pago a la tierra ceremony that I have right here. I have a link to it. You can check it out whenever I post the PowerPoint and go and watch it for yourself. It is a ceremony to Pachamama. And you can compare that to the ceremony itself, which I also have linked in the PowerPoint. So the Vatican Garden ceremony versus the real thing, go and compare them, and you'll see it's not the same thing. And it doesn't even resemble it. If we're going to talk about resemblance, okay, well, you have humans there. Yeah. You have humans in the Catholic ceremony, and you have humans in the pagan ceremony. Oh, well, there's a resemblance there. Okay. They're using human language. Yeah, both of them do that, both in the Catholic ceremony and in this other alleged pagan ceremony, right? They both use human language. You know, and so the similarities that you find are the kind of similarities that you will just find in pretty much anything. But I think it's going to be a hard sell to actually say this pagan ceremony was actually taking place there in the Vatican when you go and compare them and contrast them. Okay. But again, this is a subjective claim that they're making here, no evidence. And by the way, I want to point out this paragraph here, participants sang and held hands while dancing in a circle. That paragraph we're going to see reported immediately right around the same time by National Catholic Register, literally kind of a copy and paste thing. They say the same thing. So on the same day, around the same time, National Catholic Register says the ceremony resembled a pago a la tierra offering to Mother Earth, with exact quote there. There you go. Participants sang and held hands while dancing in a circle around the images. The dance resembled the pago a la tierra, a traditional offering to Mother Earth common among indigenous peoples in some parts of South America. No explanation was provided by the event organizers as to why the dance was performed for the feast of St. Francis or what it symbolized. I don't know why it's literally a copy and paste of the exact same thing that we saw there from CNA, but that's what it is. There's a link to it. And again, note the CNA report and also the National Catholic Register reports have not only the same thing, but provide no real evidence for that claim. So already we're getting reports at the outset that this is some form of a pagan ceremony. Now, Pedro Gabriel, from Where Peter Is, notes on October 4th, 2019, a photo by Getty Images of Pope Francis at the ceremony describes him in front of, quote, Pachamama. This is where it seems we get the first example or the first instance, possibly. I don't know if it's the first. It seems to be. But it appears this is the first time it's referred to as Pachamama right here. Let's see. Pope Francis and Cardinal Humes, Archbishop Emeritus of Sao Paulo, President of Pan Amazonian Ecclesial Network, REPAM. They're the ones, again, who put the thing on, stand in front of a statue representing Pachamama, Mother Earth, as they celebrate the feast of St. Francis of Assisi. Is this the first instance? I don't know that for a fact, but it appears this is the first time that the image is called Pachamama. Now, this is obviously a secular source, This is not a Christian source. This is a secular source, Getty Images. Is that where most people got this claim of Pachamama from? I don't know. But that is definitely a possibility. Now, of course, there's no evidence provided for this claim by Getty Images. It just throws out that it is Pachamama. That's it. No arguments, no evidence. It's just throwing it out as if it's a matter of fact. Despite the fact that the ceremony itself says it's Our Lady of the Amazon. Okay. Now, on October 4th, again, same day, the Sedevacantis website, Novus Ordo Watch, claims the Vatican garden ceremony was the worship of Pachamama. So now you have Getty Images saying it's Pachamama, and now this Sedevacantis website comes out the day of and says it's Pachamama. No evidence provided. It's just kind of thrown out there. After declaring that God desires the diversity of religions, a straw man, that all religions always look toward heaven and God, and that religious differences are necessary, the apostate Jesuit from Buenos Aires, Jorge Bergoglio, aka Pope Francis, has now hosted a syncretistic religious ceremony in the Vatican gardens that include, beside Christian prayers, the pagan worship of Pachamama, the earth fertility goddess, also known as Mother Earth or Gaia, adored by the Incas, which is a little weird because the territory of the Incas is obviously not the same as Amazon. So, yeah, some have rightly pointed out that, yeah, our geography is kind of off here. How are we claiming that this pagan goddess of the Incas made its way to the Amazon, especially in its form as a pagan goddess? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's that whole conundrum. But yeah, there you go. Novus Ordo Watch, Sedevacantis website, already the day of making that claim, in addition to a secular resource, Getty Images. Okay, so on the day of, just to recap here, the day of the ceremony itself says it's Our Lady of the Amazon, the Virgin Mary. Catholic media starts to say, well, some are claiming it's Our Lady of the Amazon. They're not actually noting that the ceremony itself says that. They're just saying, some are saying, but then they throw into the mix, but it kind of looks like this pagan ceremony. So they're already throwing that out there, but they're not yet saying it's Pachamama. That is the Catholic media. But secular media, at least with Getty Images, says Pachamama. I don't know if there's any other secular resources out there that were saying it as well. But also the Sedevacantis website says Pachamama. And again, no evidence was provided for the claim by the Sedevacantis website. Now, around the same time, the very next day, October 5th, you have Michael Voris for Church Militant spreads the claim that the ceremony was, quote, pagan. Okay, so it's kind of already a given. Now, the next day, Catholics kind of feel like, hey, it's a given. This thing was pagan. Here's a screenshot from him. Hysteria alert. The little statue at the pagan ceremony, who many are tweeting as phallic, is not. Now, me and Dragani talk about that in the previous video. You'll need to go and watch it to get more context there. That's more beside the point. It's the angle of the picture. Other angles reveal it's an arm. Do not give the lefties any ammo to call you crazy. Check your facts first. The pagan ceremony is bad enough on its own. Well, I agree with checking facts, but shouldn't we check the facts that it's pagan? Because it wasn't. So again, that's already being just kind of assumed as a given by some. The very next day, again, no evidence was really provided that this was a pagan ceremony. It's just, again, kind of assumed. Now, on October 7th, I'm sorry, that should say 2019, not 2023. I'm just in the habit of writing 2023. You know. On October 7th, 2019, at a Vatican press conference, Bishop David Gania speaks unofficially. Now, notice this. He's speaking at a press conference about the Synod. So it's not even about the Pachamama ceremony 3 days before, but this was just kind of thrown out as a question to him for a press conference related to the Synod itself, not the ceremony. And he speaks unofficially. He even notes that he's speaking unofficially. But he says, I wouldn't know how to interpret it. That is the image at the ceremony. I wouldn't know how to interpret it. We all have our own interpretations. The Virgin Mary, the Mother Earth, probably those who use this symbol demonstrated fertility, life. I don't think we need to create any connections with the Virgin Mary or a pagan element. Now, I'll point out a couple things that he doesn't seem to really even be aware of the ceremony itself. In fairness to him, he is not there to comment on the ceremony. He is there to comment on the Synod, in fairness to him. But since he comments on the matter, since it was asked to him, he clearly doesn't know that the ceremony itself calls it Our Lady of the Amazon. Because he's like, I don't think we need to create any connections. Well, excuse me, we don't have to. The ceremony itself and the people at the ceremony called it Our Lady of the Amazon. We don't have to create anything. That's what they said. So he's already, unfortunately and unintentionally, creating confusion. And that's unfortunate because somebody who represents the Vatican, even though he doesn't represent the Vatican on this particular point, when you have that face, when you have that image, you have to be clear. And if you waver, and if you're unsure, and if you're unclear, and if you don't have your facts straight, that's going to create massive ripples all throughout the Catholic world, massive problems, massive confusion. And he's saying, look, it's neither Mary nor Pachamama. He doesn't call it that, but he just says, or a pagan element. It's neither. It's nothing pagan nor holy. It's just, a representation of life. Well, again, he was wrong about that because, again, the people at the ceremony said it's Our Lady of the Amazon. But confusion was already being created, unfortunately, by some people in the Vatican who were speaking unofficially. Now, on October 10th, 2019, John Henry Weston of LifeSiteNews claims the image was Pachamama. So now you're starting to see Catholic media come out and say it's not just the pagan ritual, but it's the pagan goddess Pachamama. They're just coming out with it. And no evidence is really provided for this. It's just kind of thrown out as a given. It says that was the sentiment of Bishop David Martinez. And when he mentioned Mother Earth, you should know that what he's referring to is exactly a pagan goddess. Mother Earth is a translation of the Inca Pachamama, which is, as you can read in Wikipedia, a goddess revered by the indigenous people of the Andes. She is known as the Earth Time Mother in Inca mythology. Pachamama is a fertility goddess who presides over planting and harvesting, embodies the mountains, and causes earthquakes. She is also an ever-present and independent deity who has her own self-sufficient and creative power to sustain life on this earth. Doesn't really address the issue about the fact that Inca isn't the same as Amazon, but okay. Doesn't, really grapple with the fact that we're basing this on the bishop who is not speaking officially, and clearly himself doesn't know what he's talking about, because he himself doesn't realize that there is a reason to say that this is the Virgin Mary, because the ceremony itself does that. And instead of really grappling with that, we just go with what the bishop said, who clearly didn't know what he was talking about and was unofficial. And then you hear Mother Earth and you have to tie it. Okay, well, Mother Earth must mean Pachamama. And, again, it was already floating around by some that it was Pachamama. So it was easy for some people to connect the dots there and say, well, it's got to be Pachamama. No real evidence provided. We're just throwing it out there. It's kind of assumed at this point. Now, October 10th, 2019, the papal posse on EWTN's World Over claimed that the ceremony was the worship of the goddess Pachamama. Once again, no real evidence for this. It's just assumed as a given. But they have a pretty large reach. So on October 10th, when EWTN's The World Over promotes this with, Raymond Arroyo, Father Gerald Murray, and what's the other guy from the Catholic thing? The other guy. The papal posse, they promote this claim. and Robert Royal. I'm sorry, I think that's his name, Robert Royal. When they promote that, that just goes out everywhere because that's a pretty large reach that the show has. And so when they claimed, hey, this is the goddess Pachamama, and you have, idolatry there in the Vatican, most in the audience, they aren't fact checking any of this stuff. They're just going with it as if it's a given. And that narrative gained a stronger hold in the minds of Catholics. Let's take a brief look at it. Let's go to the 5-minute, 33-second mark. Briefly,
now
please let me know
focal point of
y'all are having any difficulties hearing the audio. Okay.
the ceremony were indigenous Amazonians bowing down, including a Franciscan, before a wooden pregnant woman, the statue of a pregnant woman, in fact, a pair of them. Now, some said this is the Virgin Mary, Our Lady of the Amazon, visiting St. Elizabeth. During one of the press conferences...
Let me actually stop right there, because as Father Deacon Dragani and I demonstrated, they weren't bowing down to any of the images in the circle. That's something he is assuming here, and he needs to actually demonstrate it. And in fact, evidence is to the contrary. So they weren't even bowing down to the image itself. There were all kinds of other things in that circle too, Christian martyrs and so on. So not just the Virgin Mary and Elizabeth, but also Christian martyrs and other items. Why are we singling it out as if they're venerating this one particular image, however, when they weren't? So that was just thrown out as if it was a matter of fact. It was also thrown out that, some are claiming that this is the Virgin Mary, but he doesn't actually note in the video. No, it's not that some are claiming it's the Virgin Mary. It's that in the video itself, they call it Our Lady of the Amazon at the 13-minute, 20-second timestamp, 27-second timestamp. It is very clear. It is said in Spanish, Our Lady of the Amazon, as the image is presented to the Holy Father, as I've shown numerous times on this video. And really, it's a point that is uncontested at this point. We all admit, yeah, okay, that's what it says. That's what the audio and video shows. But notice at the time, as this information is going out to the world, into the Catholic world, they're not being told that information. They're just being told, hey, this thing is pagan. Hey, this is idolatry in the Vatican. Some are saying it's the Virgin Mary, but it's Pachamama. They're not being given all of the facts. Now, how many of those people who watch the world over really went and fact-checked this stuff? Probably very few. Now, they then take that information and spread it to a million other people, and they take that information, spread it to a million other people, and you can see how this narrative would very quickly take root and would be very hard to uproot, even when the facts are given. Let's actually take a look at the 7-minute, 21-second mark, where they speak more about this.
Something unique, something that we've never seen before on the Vatican grounds took place. And no one knows what it was. And no one is able to interpret it. No one seems to want to take responsibility for how it was organized, or who permitted it, and why the Pope was there, and what it meant for him to be a witness as this thing was going on.
Right.
So it's a tremendous confusion. And especially after many people before the Synod even started were pointing out that the dangers of this kind of syncretism, bringing in native elements that don't really accord well with Catholicism, was going to be confusing and lead us down strange paths. I think that the fact that no one can explain this is an additional problem, besides the fact that something that is not Christianity was celebrated on the grounds of the Vatican itself.
Let's stop there. First of all, again, it's assumed this was non-Christian, despite the evidence that the ceremony itself calls it Our Lady of the Amazon, and there's nothing pagan taking place there. He is absolutely wrong when he says that nobody has explained that. He's also wrong when he says nobody has explained who organized it. That was also explained. Even CNA on that day of, as I've already shown you, demonstrated who was and wasn't responsible for it. So everything that you just heard from him wasn't true. And if anybody fact-checked that, they would see all of this wasn't true. But again, unfortunately, a lot of people aren't going to fact-check that stuff. They're just going to go with the misinformation. Now take a note at this, because you've probably noticed at this point the world over is guilty of habitually misrepresenting issues in the church, not giving you all of the facts, and in fact distorting the facts most of the time. But it gets worse. Take a look at this.
Father Jerry,
Right, Raymond, you know, that...
Go ahead, Father.
The ceremony was accurately described as a pagan religious ceremony, and that statue is the goddess, false goddess, Pachamama.
Notice he's just throwing it out there as if this is a matter of fact. It's pagan, it's idolatrous, it's Pachamama. No evidence. It's just assumed as if it is fact.
Who is like a creation god. This is horrendous, I have to say. No matter what the intention of those who invited those people there, it's quite clear that that was a pagan ritual ceremony with religious meaning to them.
Is it? Because in fact, it is not quite clear, because everything that took place there was Christian, and you would have to demonstrate that it was actually pagan in nature. So again, he's assuming his position rather than really demonstrating it. Again, Father Deacon Dragani and I have already demonstrated what I'm saying here, and so I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. However, he unfortunately never demonstrated his position.
This should not be ever occur in a Catholic institution, certainly not in the Holy See. I regret that the Pope tolerated it.
Now he's claiming that the Pope tolerated idolatry. It's a massively grave accusation. If he is wrong, wow, you just accuse the Pope of tolerating idolatry in Rome.
And I think the message has to be clear. Paganism is not here in the earth to teach Catholicism. It's the other way around. Catholicism is meant to overthrow pagan false notions. And certainly having a so-called inaugural religious ceremony.
This is just interesting in light of the fact that we in Catholicism have all kinds of elements from paganism that we baptize and purified and use for the glory of God. And rightly so. I mean, that's always been the policy for 2,000 years. But Protestant fundamentalists often throw this in our face, and they'll point out to all sorts of things, not only in our history as Catholics, but even frankly, you could point to it in also the Old Covenant, as I've demonstrated at length on this channel already. Yeah, we have some elements that we took from paganism in the Old Covenant and also in the New Covenant. Nothing that was inherently idolatrous, but things that did derive from pagan communities. We purified them, stripped them of any kind of evil and idolatrous intent and meaning, and then we used them for the glory of God. That is the constant history of the Old Covenant people of God and the Catholic Church. There's just no way around that. So I just find it a little interesting when I hear Catholics talk this way, because it's like, do you know anything about history and Catholicism? I don't know.
Ceremony blessing the Synod with pagan fertility. There was another statue of a male goddess, which was horrendous.
Did you hear that? Listen to that again.
Statue of a male goddess, which was horrendous.
A male goddess. So he's saying not only was there the female goddess, but he says a male goddess. I guess he means a male god. I think that's what he means. I don't think he affirms transgenderism or that whole woke movement and all that. So I think he means a male god. Be that as it may, were there any male gods present? No. No, the image that he is referring to, according to a Franciscan friar who was present, was that was an image of a Christian martyr. So yet another instance where we don't have our facts straight. We're just throwing out claims that we can't really substantiate.
I reject this completely. I think most Catholics do. I think the Pope in his kindness sat there and tolerated it, but really, whoever organized that imposed on the Holy See a very intolerable thing.
Well, it was...
Okay, so again, throwing out the claims, but not really substantiating it. And yeah, it was the same one that people were claiming was a phallic figure. That's the image he's referencing. It was not a phallic figure, as it was demonstrated from multiple camera angles. It was an arm, not the other part of the human body. And then also Again, it's not a male goddess or a male god. It is a male representation of Christian martyrs. Okay. So again, notice none of the claims are substantiated. It was just, thrown out there as if it's a matter of fact. They didn't really engage the actual facts. But you can totally understand how people who are watching EWTN's World Over are getting their information from this, and they're going to take it as gospel truth. They're not going to fact check it. Okay. Now, on October 11th, 2019, the next day, LifeSiteNews ties the Pachamama claim to the pago a la tierra claim made previously by National Catholic Register and Catholic News Agency. It states, as a matter of fact, that the ceremony was the pago a la tierra ritual without any evidence. It says, we now know a bit more about what happened after the pagan ceremony of the pago a la tierra, payment to the earth, in the Vatican gardens under Pope Francis's very eyes. Again, it's just thrown out as if this is a matter of fact. So the claim that was made on the day of the ceremony has now just taken root as this is fact, even though no evidence was ever provided. It's just fact. This is gospel truth. You have to accept it. Another unofficial Vatican explanation, I'll say at the outset, the Vatican did very poorly here. And you'll kind of see why. Not only were they not there to answer these questions about the ceremony itself, which perhaps they should have been. They were there to answer questions about the Synod, that is understandable, but perhaps there should have been a press conference specifically about the ceremony, given the controversy. You'll find out why that probably didn't happen, or probably why that did not happen. Let me rephrase it. We know it didn't happen, but I think we'll find out why that was the case, as I'll demonstrate here in a little bit. But constantly, people who represent the Vatican for the Synod, even though they don't really know about the ceremony itself, and they're there to comment about the Synod, not the ceremony, they're being asked questions about this. And so they speak unofficially. But they fumble their way through it, and it's clear every single time they don't know what they're talking about. And some of them even admit, hey, I don't really know. I haven't even seen the ceremony, but I'm going to comment on it nonetheless. Okay. But actually, before we get to that, here's somebody who did know what they're talking about. It is an unofficial explanation, but here's somebody who did know what they're talking about because they were one of the organizers of the event. Okay, this is October 11th, 2019, Father Roberto Rojas, one of the event organizers. So he is in a position to know. Says that the image is Our Lady of the Amazon and is based on a devotion they have to Our Lady. He says, quote, they carved in wood an image of a blessed mother who is pregnant. She is the Virgin, and we have called her Our Lady of the Amazon, end quote. I'll show you the video here in just a second. But here's somebody who is in a position to speak. It's unofficial, but he would be in the know. And as an event organizer, he clearly notes it is Our Lady of the Amazon. And that's obviously confirms what the audio and video itself in the ceremony tells us, which is Our Lady of the Amazon. It's the Virgin Mary. Watch this. Let's go to the 15-second timestamp. Watch the video together. Skip through this here. Again from one of the event organizers, Father Roberto Rojas, says, this is a devotion that we already had. We carved an image of the Blessed Virgin, and it's Our Lady of the Amazon. Once again, that corroborates what we've seen from the ceremony itself. Okay. Now, continuing to look at the issue in the media, however, on October 16th, 2019, Skojec, who has since unfortunately apostatized and left and gone to agnosticism, and it's not right, but I could totally understand if you believe that the Catholic is worshiping an idol and you believe the Holy Father hates you as a Catholic, I could understand why you would probably leave the Catholic Church. Skojec at 1 Peter 5 accuses the Vatican of idolatry. So again, you're seeing this all over media from extreme fringe groups to mainstream Catholic media. They're all throwing out the claim it's idolatry, it's Pachamama, and so on. He says a number of Catholic commentators, myself included, observed at the time that whatever it was that was happening in the Vatican Gardens, which again should be red alert, should be a flag here. He's noting that he doesn't really know what it was, but whatever it was, it looked very much like some sort of pagan idolatry. And of course, 1 Peter 5 has many other articles about Pachamama idolatry after that. But that was the first one. Now, here's another unofficial Vatican explanation. On October 16th, 2019, Dr. Paolo Ruffini, again, creates more confusion. Speaks unofficially. Not there to comment on the question, but it was asked. He doesn't really know. And here's what we got. At the Vatican press conference about the Synod, he notes, strictly in a personal capacity, that the image is a statue that represents life. That's it. And he doesn't really engage the fact that the ceremony itself calls it Our Lady of the Amazon, or people who are in charge with organizing the event say it's Our Lady of the Amazon. He just says it represents life. That's it. He also notes, I believe to try to see pagan symbols or to see evil. It is not. So in other words, it's not something pagan. It's just a representation of life. But not very helpful considering the actual facts. Now, same day, October 16th, same press conference, Father Giacomo Costa, S.J., Secretary of Information Commission, said the image is an indigenous woman who brings life. And he notes, nobody said it was the Virgin Mary. He also says he hasn't seen the image. It was very unsure about the matter. So this is comical how badly they're butchering it. Again, in fairness to them, they're not there to answer questions about the ceremony. They're there to answer questions about the Synod. But they're asked questions about the ceremony. Unfortunately, they decided to comment on it not knowing what they're talking about, clearly admitting, I haven't even seen the thing, but nobody said it was the Virgin Mary, when literally the ceremony itself says it's the Virgin Mary. And you would know that if you saw it. Therefore, don't comment on it. Unfortunately, well-intentioned as they may be, they created a lot of confusion here. Okay, so it's an indigenous woman who brings life. It's not some pagan goddess, but also they're undermining the fact that it is the Virgin Mary. Now, October 21st, 2019, the images were stolen and thrown into the Tiber. We're going to have more on that later, on who organized that, how that was done. Now, this can be seen in a video entitled Pachamama Idols Thrown into the Tiber River. I'll just, ask you to go and watch it at your own leisure. You've most likely seen it already anyway. But it's just an image where they go and steal it's a video where they go and steal the images and throw them in the Tiber. That's it. Okay, here's another unofficial Vatican explanation from, once again, Dr. Paolo Ruffini. October 21st, the day that the images were stolen, he says, we have already repeated several times here that those statues represent life, fertility, and Mother Earth. Oh, boy. Nope. Drop the ball again. They're all confused. None of them know what they're talking about here. Again, he's speaking unofficially. I get it, but still, come on now. And to say Mother Earth, now that's interesting because Pachamama can refer to either a pagan goddess or just the words Pacha and Mama could mean Mother Earth, right? Pacha being earth, Mama being mother. And this is why, in fact, surrounding Pachamama, there are different devotions. There are some who see Pachamama as merely a representation of Mother Earth. There are others who see Pachamama as an actual goddess. That's the Incan Empire. Okay, so there is different ways in which people understand Pachamama. But then you throw out Mother Earth. Well, what are people going to think? Well, they're going to say, see, Pachamama, because you admitted it's Mother Earth. And Pacha means earth, and Mama means mother. And he's still not on the ball, doesn't know what he's talking about, doesn't realize the ceremony itself says Our Lady of the Amazon. Synod organizers, event organizers say it's Our Lady of the Amazon. And then, of course, also various volunteers at the Santa Maria in Transpontina, where the images were kept until they were stolen on October 21st. Some of those volunteers at Santa Maria noted that the image represents Mother Earth. And now they're in context, if you go and read the actual transcript, they're referring to Mother Earth, that is Pachamama representing Mother Earth, not Pachamama, the pagan goddess. But they're also creating confusion, some of the volunteers here. Some of the other people there said, it could be the Virgin Mary too. None of them are very clear on what it is either. So they're creating confusion as well. Now, also note, in conjunction with this discussion about Mother Earth and venerating Mother Earth, the concept of Mother Earth and its veneration can be found in St. Francis and his Canticle of the Sun. He says, "Praise be you, my Lord, through Sister Mother Earth, who sustains us and governs us, who produces varied fruits with colored flowers and herbs." So you can kind of find this tradition of venerating this concept, not worshiping Mother Earth, but, appreciating what God does through earth and giving us life. Kind of see that. And that's how some of these volunteers were understanding Pachamama as just a mere appreciation for Mother Earth, not for some pagan goddess. Now, I want to still say, you're all missing the mark because it's supposed to be Our Lady of the Amazon. So you're all creating confusion. Okay, October 23rd, 2019, Brother Afonso Murad, who was involved with REPAM, the group involved with the Synod and the Vatican Garden Ceremony, explains what the image is. Now, this is an unofficial explanation, but he gives his account of what he believes it is. This is translated by Pedro Gabriel. And there is a link to the actual Facebook video at the end of this, but it's a pretty long quote, so let me go ahead and read it to you. "I am Brother Afonso Murad, and I am here in Rome at the Synod for the Amazon, and I want to clarify something that many people in Brazil asked me to address. This Monday morning, or what seems like it, a small group entered in the Transpontina Church of the Carmelites, where there have been a series of celebrations about the Amazon, happening in parallel with the Synod. Each day, there are at least 2 moments of prayer, besides lectures and expositions. In that context, there was a series of symbols which were used at this location. Among them, there were 3 female silhouettes of an indigenous pregnant woman that symbolized the earth that takes care of us, and also the indigenous people." So he wants to say it's a symbol of earth. "I want to clarify that contrary to what has been heard in Brazil, this is not a religious image." So he's basically saying it's not the Virgin Mary. It's just a symbol of earth. "It was not the object of worship. It's simply a symbol of the indigenous peoples that has been labeled as if it were an image of Pachamama, the Mother Earth. The indigenous peoples do not worship images of Mother Earth as we do with an image of Our Lady or the Blessed Sacrament. Therefore, it was simply a religious symbol among many that are present in that church for those who want to see it. Therefore, this act was an act of violence, of disrespect, and therefore cannot be approved by any of us. Would you like it if someone went to your church and took any of your religious symbols, be it a candle or a cloth? Would you like it? Of course not. Therefore, we are clearly against this violent act, and we also do not give too much importance to it, because what is important is that our eyes, our minds, and hearts are directed towards the Amazon, towards the church, and the Amazon, and for your mission to announce the gospel and a dialogue with the Amazonian people." Again, translated by Pedro Gabriel. You can find a video of it there. But what are we seeing from this? Well, we're seeing more confusion, because you have the actual ceremony itself calls it Our Lady of the Amazon. One of the organizers calls it Our Lady of the Amazon, but then a guy affiliated with one of the groups of the organizers says, well, it's just a representation of life. And so some of the people surrounding the issue itself aren't very clear, even though the ceremony itself says Our Lady of the Amazon. Some of the people surrounding it aren't very clear on what it is either. Now, they don't believe that it's a pagan goddess. They're clear on that. They're clear on what it's not, but on what it is it just a representation of life, indigenous people, or the Virgin Mary? That's where you're going to start to get different answers. And so that is part of the problem, because they don't have a fixed meaning to it, assigned to it. At the ceremony, there's a fixed meaning, but some of the people surrounding involvement with it don't have a fixed meaning on it. And that's part of the problem. And that also gives rise to why some of the people who are unofficially commenting on it themselves don't really know. Now, on October 25th, 2023, Pope Francis calls the image Pachamama, but notes the images were there without idolatrous intentions. So he's saying there's no idolatry here, but he calls it Pachamama. That's interesting. Does this confirm what people have been saying, that this is a pagan goddess? Well, a couple points here. Number one, in the actual transcript of what he says, Pachamama is in italics. We'll look at what he says here in a second. But number one, Pachamama is in italics. And number two, you can see immediately after that, Vatican spokesman Matteo Bruni, as noted by Reuters, said the Pope used the word as a means to identify the statues because that is the way they have become known in the Italian media, and not as a reference to the goddess. So Pope Francis used the term Pachamama to refer to the images, not because it is a pagan goddess, but rather that's just how people are referring to it colloquially. In fact, I'll be frank with you, I still sometimes call it Pachamama when I know it was Our Lady of the Amazon. I still call it that because that's what everybody else calls it that. We call the Protestant rebellion, we call it the Protestant Reformation, when we know perfectly well as Catholics, that was no Reformation. That was a rebellion. That was schism. That was heresy. It was no Reformation, but we still call it that because that's kind of what everybody calls it, even though it's technically not accurate. We still say that the sun rises when we know very well the sun ain't rising. Okay. So, sometimes we're guilty of this as well. I think this was a fumble on part of Pope Francis. We'll find out why he fumbled here in a moment. But this was a fumble. But you could also understand partly where it's coming from. That's just how people are, calling it. And it was, again, immediately clarified. He's not saying this is a goddess. And by the way, that's consistent with what he says when he says there was no idolatrous intentions. How could you say that if you're admitting that this is a pagan goddess, right? Clearly, he's not saying it's the pagan goddess, Pachamama. So look at the transcript. Good afternoon. I want to say a word about the statues of, notice in italics, Pachamama, that were taken from the Church of the Transpontina, which were there without idolatrous intentions. Again, he could not say that if he's actually saying that this is the pagan goddess. And were thrown into the Tiber. First of all, this happened in Rome, and as the bishop of the diocese, I ask pardon of the persons who were offended by this act. Then I want to communicate to you that the statues which created such attention in the media were retrieved from the Tiber. The statues were not damaged. The commander of the Carabinieri desires that you should be informed of this recovery before the news is made public. At the moment, the news is confidential, and the statues are being kept in the commander's office. The commander has expressed his desire to follow up on any indications that you would like to give concerning the manner of publication of the news and any other initiatives you may want to take in this regard. For example, the commander said the exhibition of the statues during the Holy Mass for the closing of the Synod. We'll see. I have delegated the Secretary of State to respond. This is a bit of good news. Thank you. All right. Is it a fumble for him to have called it what most people are calling it at the time? Yes. Yes. Did that do more damage than good? Yes, that did a lot of damage because, I mean, as soon as he said that, everybody said, see, it's the pagan goddess. Even Pope Francis admits it, even though he's saying in context, no, there's no idolatry. So that's clearly not what he's saying. Even though there's a clarification immediately after that by Vatican spokesman, no, he's just using it because that is how the media was calling it. All that's ignored. Pope Francis admitted Vatican idolatry. It's a pagan goddess. End of story. Now, here's why I believe Pope Francis fumbled here. Not only because of the fact that, again, that's what everybody called it, but here was something interesting from Let Us Dream. I believe where Peter has pointed this out in an article. The 2020 book, Let Us Dream, Pope Francis recalls, quote, what was beautiful in that synod, the deep respect for indigenous culture and the presence of the native people in the prayer services, was twisted by hysterical accusations of paganism and syncretism. Although we were barely aware of it inside the synod hall, there was no shortage of disturbances outside. Now that is telling. The Pope is basically saying, yeah, we heard a little bit about the fact that people are making these claims, but we didn't realize how bad it was. We didn't realize how many people were out there claiming Vatican idolatry, Pachamama idolatry. We thought it was a few people out there because we're fixated on what's going on in the Synod Hall with the Synod. We didn't realize how severe the disturbances were outside in the media. So when Pope Francis calls it that, just because that's what everybody else called it, he didn't realize what he just did is he gave rocket launchers to the critics. He gave them so much ammunition with that. Even though for anybody who's fair-minded, they would say he's just referring to how it's referred to in the media. He's not saying it's an idol. That's not how most people took it. Did Pope Francis fail to appreciate how severe the situation was and how careful he should be with his words? Yes. Did he underappreciate the fact that there needed to be an official clarification from the Vatican? Yes. So were there some failures here from Pope Francis and the Vatican? Yes. However, be that as it may, whatever failures it has, I think we're seeing not all the confusion is coming from the Pope and the Vatican. They're maybe not doing enough to address it, but not all of it is coming from the Vatican. A lot of it is coming from the critics. But this was careless. Another unofficial Vatican explanation. Again, all of these are unofficial. The Vatican never offered an official explanation, which, again, I think is a criticism. On October 25th, 2023, 4 days after the stealing of the images, Dr. Paolo Ruffini stated again, no prostrations or rituals were performed. We must all be rigorous in telling things that have happened in front of the cameras. I want to say, once again, we are just epically failing here because there were prostrations. And I can even say there were rituals performed during the ceremony, but they were Catholic rituals and they were prostrations that we have in the Catholic Church. I mean, we have prostrations in the Catholic Church. Us Eastern Catholics, we know that very well. Unfortunately, the Latin West has forgotten about prostrations, but yeah, I mean, it's perfectly Catholic. Now, there was no prostration to the image itself, and even so, in the Catholic Church and the Eastern tradition, we do prostrate and venerate images of the Blessed Virgin Mary, not with a prostration of worship, but a prostration of honor and reverence. The difference between latria and dulia, of course. But further exacerbating the situation with more confusion from him. Yeah, we really failed here on that one. So they didn't help a whole lot. All right, so Pedro Gabriel offers a really helpful recap of what we've kind of seen, with some of these people with unofficial explanations. The native woman that is in the ceremony itself on October 4th, 2019, and Father Rojas, the one I showed in a video earlier, say it's Our Lady of the Amazon. They have not attributed a pagan meaning to the figure. Dr. Ruffini from the Vatican Dicastery of Communications said in his first answer to the topic, albeit not acting in his official capacity, I believe to try and see pagan symbols or to see evil, it is not. Before him, Bishop David Guinea had also been asked about the meaning of the statue, and he replied, we don't need to create any connections with the Virgin Mary or with a pagan element. Father Lopez, interviewed by San Martin, asked if it was part of a pagan ritual. The priest offered a flat no. Brother Alfonso Murid is clear that the figure is not a religious image and that it did not receive any kind of cult. So there's a lot of confusion because they're all saying different things. My point, however, is you need to go to the source itself, which is the ceremony itself. Go to the primary sources, not what other people are saying. Go to the thing itself. In the thing itself, they call it Our Lady of the Amazon. That is what really settles it. All of this other stuff is confusion. And yes, some of these other people are responsible for some of that confusion. But notice none of these people say it's a pagan Pachamama idol. None of them say that. None of them believe it's an idol. None of them say that there's idolatry taking place. Now, on October 27th, 2019, the Pope said the following at his Angelus. For the way ahead, let us invoke the Virgin Mary, venerated and loved as Queen of the Amazon. She became one, and not by conquering, but by enculturating herself. With a mother's humble courage, she became the protector of her children, the defense of the oppressed, always going out to the culture of the people. There is not a standard culture. There is not a pure culture that purifies the others. There is the gospel, pure, which is enculturated. To she who cared for Jesus in the poor house of Nazareth, we entrust the poorest children in our common home. Clearly, he is saying, hey, guys, yeah, look, this isn't a pagan idol. This is the Virgin Mary, the Queen of the Amazon, and this is the Virgin Mary being enculturated into various cultures. Now, the controversy with the Missio Foundation came up in late October. There was a magazine published in April of 2019, so way before the Synod, but people dug it up in late October because of the frenzy of Pachamama. Now, the Missio Foundation is a pastoral body formed by the Italian Bishops' Conference that publishes this magazine. Now, again, this magazine is not the decisions of the Italian Bishops' Conference. The Italian Bishops' Conference has a pastoral body, and then that pastoral body has a magazine. And as you can imagine, most of the time the bishops have absolutely nothing to do with any of these things because they're busy, understandably, dealing with a million other things in their diocese, and they delegate these things to laity. Okay, well, the magazine in April of 2019 contained a prayer on page 17 of the magazine, which I'll give a link to in this PowerPoint. Now, it has a prayer to Pachamama, again, way before the actual ceremony in April. It's not clear whether the magazine was promoting the prayer in the magazine as something for Catholics to pray, or it was simply an example of what some in the Andes believe. So it's not clear. They just put a prayer there. And so again, it's not clear, like, are you suggesting that Catholics pray this thing? Or are you just saying that this is basically something that people in the region pray? Again, it resurfaced October 29th from Catholic Culture, the best that I can tell, among others, who were panicking at the time and, found this thing and thought, see, Pachamama idolatry. The Vatican's corrupt. There's a letter, or I'm sorry, a copy of the magazine, and here is a link to the article that you can read about. Okay, so there was that whole thing too. Now, in 2020, Peruvian Dominican theologian Sister Mila Diaz Solano, so, I mean, after the fact, after the ceremony, she explains what Pachamama means. She says, from the perspective of Peruvians, Pachamama is not a goddess. It is not an idol. It expresses a relationship. Pachamama, outside of any indigenous religion, is a Quechua expression rooted in two words, Pacha, which means earth, and Mama, which means mother. If you ask a shaman who is a religious leader from an indigenous religion in the Amazon, or a member of an ancestral religion, non-Christian, the answer you'll receive is different than mine. So if you ask some of these other people, some of these non-Christians and shamans, you ask them what Pachamama is, you're going to get a different answer than what it is for us Christians. Among indigenous and non-Catholic peoples, Pachamama is their goddess, i.e. the land itself. So it's a goddess for them. What we call Mother Nature, as well as the water and other elements of creation. Pachamama has no representation, but many pictures represent the relationship between the people and the land. So there's all kinds of meanings behind this. Behind Pachamama itself, depending on who you ask, there's different views for what it is. So for some, Pachamama is a goddess. For others, Pachamama just represents Mother Earth, or a relationship, or the people, or life, or fertility. It's all over the place. What was it in the image in the ceremony itself? Well, it certainly wasn't Pachamama. Certainly wasn't a Pachamama goddess. It was Our Lady of the Amazon. Another unofficial explanation. I'm sorry. I should redo that title. I apologize. This should actually be an official. I should say official explanation. I'll fix that later. On February 2nd, 2020, Pope Francis released Querida Amazonia and noted the following. So here's the document that came out of the whole synod. Here's the final papal document that came. This isn't the final document from the synod. You do have their final report. This is the final document that he promulgates in his magisterium based on that whole synod and its documents. Quote, it is possible to take up an indigenous symbol in some way without necessarily considering it as idolatry. I mean, that should be Catholicism 101. I mean, so many of the things in our liturgy, that's what we did. I mean, that's just truth right there. A myth charged with spiritual meaning can be used to advantage and not always considered a pagan error. Some religious festivals have a sacred meaning and are occasions for gathering and fraternity, albeit in need of a gradual process of purification and maturation. This is nothing new from Pope Francis, by the way. This is constant Catholic teaching. In fact, I did a whole video on Catholicism and enculturation. A missionary of souls will try to discover the legitimate needs and concerns that seek an outlet in a time imperfect, partial, and mistaken religious expressions, and will attempt to respond to them with an encultured spirituality. Okay. But it's clear he's basically putting this in there to say, look, there's no idolatry. We're not in favor of idolatry. We're not worshiping some pagan goddess. You can have indigenous symbols that are not necessarily idolatrous. Now, before we get into the next section here of condemnations of Vatican idolatry by various figures, we're going to take a quick break because we're about an hour and 20 minutes into this. I'm going to step away, give me some more coffee, and we'll meet back in about 5 minutes. So let's give it just a moment here. Hey, everybody, just wanted to tell you about my new free ebook, Church Chaos, Biblical Insights for Confused Catholics. If you are a confused Catholic and you're thinking about leaving the Catholic Church, or you're thinking about converting to the church, but you see that there's a crisis in the church and you're just unsure, this is the book for you. Again, it is free. Just simply go to reasonandtheology.com. You'll see a pop-up that comes up on your screen. Just simply click on it and you'll put in your email and it will provide you the free PDF ebook right then and there. Please check it out if you're confused about the situation in the Catholic Church today. reasonandtheology.com. Are you a Catholic thinking about converting to Eastern Orthodoxy? Or are you a Protestant discerning whether or not to become Catholic or Eastern Orthodox? If so, I have the book just for you. It's called Answering Orthodoxy. It engages all of the arguments that Eastern Orthodox use against the Catholic Church. I respond to all of them. I show that they are in error, and in fact, they're inconsistent, because the things that Orthodox are objecting to are in fact found in their own tradition. So the fullness of the faith can only be found in the Catholic Church. Check out the book right now at shop.catholic.com for your copy today. All right, let's continue here. So let's look at condemnations of Vatican idolatry in Catholic media. So on November 5th, Father Mitch Pacwa claims the ceremony that took place on October 4th was the worship of an idol. This can be seen in a video entitled Scripture and Tradition with Father Mitch Pacwa on EWTN on his channel, on his show there. You can watch it at your own leisure. But in effect, Father Pacwa gives no evidence for the claim of idolatry in the Vatican other than a personal anecdote, and fails to engage all the evidence to the contrary. It was pretty disappointing. On October 26, 2019, Bishop Schneider, again, the very one who signed a document in 2022 condemning the papal magisterium for teaching heresy, compares the Vatican garden ceremony to the golden calf and claims it was Pachamama idolatry without any evidence or engagement of the facts. So it's just thrown out there as if this is gospel truth. In the October 26 open letter, Bishop Schneider is also calling on all Catholics, bishops, priests, and laity to offer acts of reparation, protest, and correction for the use of the Pachamama statues, which he calls a new golden calf. Bishop Schneider writes, syncretism and paganism are like poisons entering the veins of the mystical body of Christ, the Church. So, a lot of people who follow and respect him are, being fed this stuff by Bishop Schneider, and you could understand why they are very concerned. Moving on to the next one, on October 24th, an interview with EWTN's Raymond Arroyo, Cardinal Muller, again, who was one of the 2016 Dubia signers, as well as the 2023 Dubia signers, again, the three very problematic cardinals that we see stirring up issues every single time before every single synod in this pontificate, Cardinal Muller, Cardinal Brandmuller, and Cardinal Burke. And he now comes out and claims the ceremony was idolatrous without any evidence or engagement of the facts. He says the great mistake was to bring the idols into the church, not to put them out. Let me remind you, this is the same Cardinal Muller who recently came out and accused Pope Francis of teaching heresy many times. Okay, on October 29th, Cardinal Brandmuller, again, 2016 Dubia, 2023 Dubia, claimed the ceremony was idolatrous, but he provides no evidence and did not engage the facts, just like Cardinal Muller. He says these two courageous Maccabees, the people who removed the abomination of desolation in the holy place, are the prophets of today. Wow, strong language. Obviously, the abomination of desolation harkens back to the book of Daniel, and also the abomination of desolation that took place in the temple in 70 AD. Okay. Now, December 12th, Cardinal Burke states in a homily, again, Burke, 2016, 2019, 2023, each synod, stirring the pot. He says this in a homily: Satan makes bold to sow his lies and the seeds of confusion and destruction also in the church. A most shocking manifestation of how Satan has entered into the church was the recent cult of the pagan idol, the Pachamama, Mother Earth, in the Vatican gardens, and even more grievously before the tomb of St. Peter in St. Peter's Basilica. He also stated it was the most grievous offense to God, the clear and unconscionable violation of the first commandment. In a homily in a Catholic church at the shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe, during the liturgy, accuses the Vatican of Pachamama worship and idolatry. On November 5th, 2019, Archbishop Vigano, the one who has now sedevacantis, a schismatic, who has created a schismatic seminary and is now starting a parallel church, as I've shown in multiple videos, including the one I did earlier today. This schismatic says, he speaks out against the Vatican's alleged idolatry of Pachamama. He notes, like many others, including Bishop Athanasius Schneider and Professor Roberto de Mattei, I think this young man is a hero, in reference to the one who threw the images into the Tiber. The former papal nuncio turned whistleblower told Robert Moynihan in comments made on Monday, he is a person who wished to defend the first commandment. So he's saying, the Vatican's guilty of idolatry. This guy is a guy who, was not standing for idolatry and defended the first commandment. And by the way, the whole whistleblower, what's funny is his first letter coming out, accusing the Pope and everybody else. Turns out a lot of that was just fake information, fake news, false claims. And that didn't turn out very accurate. That was posted by Church Militant. On November 7th, 2019, Archbishop Vigano called for a reconsecration of St. Peter's Basilica for the appalling idolatrous profanations. And he spoke of the abomination of idolatrous rites has entered the sanctuary of God, and it has given rise to a new form of apostasy whose seeds, which have been active for a long time, are growing with renewed vigor and effectiveness. Now, let's talk a little bit about Taylor Marshall's involvement in the Pachamama issue. Taylor's involvement in throwing the images into the Tiber. I documented this at length before Trent Horn and also Vatican Catholic, but I'm going to show Trent Horn's summary of it, since he summarizes the issue in about 3 minutes. So let's watch that little segment, and you can see what took place here with his involvement. Let's go to the 39-minute mark right here. Let me know if y'all can't hear it. By the way, I'll just go ahead and make sure to enable audio here. All right, let's go.
Deception and conspiracy. That does not mean he is always untrustworthy. Take Taylor Marshall, for example. For someone who writes about conspiracies, he himself was involved in one related to the 2019 Pachamama incident at the Vatican. In 2019, Marshall interviewed Alexander Chuguel, the Austrian Catholic who threw what everyone was calling the Pachamama statue into the Tiber River. In that interview, Marshall never indicated he was involved in the event or the creation of the original video. At the beginning of the episode, he even asks if he pronounced Chuguel's name correctly. The whole thing gives off the vibe that Marshall and Chuguel have never met before this interview. It gives that vibe off.
I'm here with Alexander Chuguel. Did I say that correctly, Alexander?
Yes, you did.
He is the man. You've seen him in the video. I mean, we saw people come out and rally, even though we didn't know your name, we didn't know your face. We saw people come out and take a stand and say, idols in church is a step too far.
It's interesting that this interview is now unlisted and is not.
Yeah, I remember I pointed this out at the time because I thought, wait, hold on. As soon as the new video between him and Alexander came out with the points of discontinuity, I tried to go back and find the original video, could not find it. And it was because it was unlisted. Finally, somebody sent me a copy of it, and I saw, oh, wow, this is why I couldn't find it. It was unlisted. I remember I went live at the time and asked the question, hey, is there a reason why this is unlisted? Because it does seem a little conspicuous here that the very video that now shows some massive points of discontinuity with what was just revealed on Taylor Marshall's live stream that he was not expecting to be revealed, but his guest revealed it. Now that this shows some massive points of discontinuity, why is the original video all of a sudden unlisted and people can't go and find it and see these points of discontinuity? I asked that question. Of course, Taylor Marshall never responded and gave an explanation.
Not publicly available on Marshall's YouTube page. That's probably because in 2020, when Chugwell was interviewed again on Marshall's podcast after he got COVID, he inadvertently revealed that he had met Marshall before this first interview in 2019. In fact, Marshall planned the whole thing. He paid for Chugwell to fly to Rome, and then Marshall was involved in the creation of the video that was later put on YouTube about this. Here's what they said.
Everyone knows you as the guy who threw the Pacha idols in the river, and we thank you again for doing that. That was a great moment of victory and joy.
Well, now Taylor, isn't now the time to tell the people a little bit about how we were in contact?
I guess perhaps we can. I wasn't prepared for that, but yeah, Alexander and I.
Note this: he was not expecting for this to happen live on his show. Alex already brought it up, so he can't be like, "No, don't tell anybody about that," because then everybody's going to be like, "Wait, what are you hiding here?" So he now tells us a very different story, and whenever we find out that this story is completely at odds in several areas with what he originally said in his interview with Alexander, we all of a sudden started asking questions, but the original video was unlisted, so we couldn't go back and actually show, hey, hold on, there's some massive points of discontinuity here, because again, he unlisted it right at that time.
Had met in Rome before all this. We'd met before even the Pachas were out. And when we learned about the tree that was planted in that ceremony with the Pachas, we were at dinner and we were discussing how we might go in and rip that tree out of the ground.
How dare they plant a tree? We need to rip that tree out. Who does this? We need to go go rip that tree out. How dare they? I could see Taylor over there trying to pull the tree out. Straining, trying to pull at the tree trunk. What? Why? What did the tree do? Why does it have to suffer punishment because it was planted? But anyways, yeah, now we're also noticing a very different story. He clearly knew how to pronounce his name. They had known each other for over a month and had met and all that. Yeah. There's other points of massive discontinuity, which are mutually exclusive. Like they're diametrically opposed. They cannot be harmonized.
You worked out your plan with your friend, and I wired you some money for airfare, and you guys flew from Vienna over to Rome, and you got it done.
That's it. Yes,
it was a wonderful thing. And then you sent me the video footage.
Yes,
and
you cut it.
And I edited the video.
Except in the original video, Alexander said he was the one who edited the video, but just throwing that out. Okay.
Footage. And then this has never been told before. And then as I just waited until you texted me and said, our airplane is off the ground in Rome. We're free. We're out of Rome. And then at that point, I uploaded the footage.
So as I said, conspiracies to promote false narratives
didn't Alexander say he was the one who uploaded it at the airport?
Do happen, but that doesn't mean the people involved are always untrustworthy, be they the U.S. government or Taylor Marshall. Not everything Taylor Marshall or other online traditionalists do is bad. I really appreciate the work Marshall once did with the new St. Thomas Institute.
Okay. All right. So you get a a very quick summary of it there. You could see some more details from this video by the Diamond Brothers, which I certainly do not recommend the vast majority of their content, unless you just want some really good entertainment to laugh at. But at the 7-minute 45-second mark to the 16-minute 32-second mark at this YouTube link, you can see more points of discontinuity brought out. I won't rehearse them here since I've already gone over them before. Now, I do want to briefly cover about 6 minutes of this video where Taylor Marshall looks back on the Pachamama event in his video entitled, "Did Pope Francis watch Taylor Marshall's podcast and restrict the Latin Mass over Pachamama?" I thought this was an interesting segment from the video, so let's take a look at it and you'll see why.
A priest,
All
a
right,
bishop.
so we're going to go to the 6-minute 11-second mark. Here we go.
The third episode that's related to all of this is the Pachamama incident. I was in Rome. I was invited by John Henry Weston of LifeSiteNews with a bunch of other Catholics, most of which were traditional, like Roberto de Mattei. And we had a panel. And after that panel was over, there was a reception and there were journalists there and they were talking to us and interviewing us. And then afterward at dinner, John Henry Weston at LifeSiteNews showed me his phone of a picture of a garden ritual. It's the one you know famously now, inside the Vatican garden, where they have planted a tree.
Now look at that. Look at that. Right here. Virgin Mary and Elizabeth, in addition to many other things in this circle.
And there's a blanket on the ground with all these tokens, and there are two statues.
Notice, again, a ton of other stuff in there.
That were in the clip that John Henry Weston showed me. This was the day it happened. And we both were looking at these little statues. They're pregnant ladies, dark wood, pregnant ladies with sort of a red embryonic preborn child in there. And we're like, what is that? So we're asking around, and my memory might be wrong on this. There was a lot of people around. They're saying that that is Our Lady pregnant with our Lord Jesus and Saint Elizabeth pregnant with John the Baptist. You'll remember the second joyful mystery is the visitation of Our Lady. She's pregnant with Jesus. She goes and visits her kinswoman, Elizabeth, who's pregnant with John the Baptist. Or someone who clarified and said, no, it's a symbol of the visitation.
Now, wait, the symbol, you'll note in the video itself, they call it Our Lady of the Amazon, a point that Taylor Marshall often despises whenever he speaks of, quote, Pope-splainers, aka Catholics. And anytime Pope-splainers are brought up, it's kind of humorous to watch his videos, even the recent ones where he talks about it. In fact, I think he mentioned it today. Anytime the Pachamama issue is brought up, he despises the fact that the fact of the matter is the ceremony itself calls it Our Lady of the Amazon, and he does not like that because it goes contrary to the narrative that he eventually adopted. But he heard early on, at the very beginning, this was the visitation, this was the Virgin Mary. But that point, you know, that particular understanding doesn't fit with his narrative and his agenda. So watch what happens.
Now, we knew the statues looked sort of strange, indigenous, but as Catholics, we're like, well, if that's the interpretation and that's like an indigenous representation of that biblical Catholic mystery, well, then that's fine.
And that's what it was, according to the ceremony itself, which he still to this day refuses to accept.
But we did talk about why was there this Mother Earth ceremony with shamans.
Wait, there wasn't a shaman. That is a claim that he makes with absolutely zero evidence. She is not a shaman. She is a Catholic, and there was no pagan ceremony here. Again, he assumes the position that he has not actually proven. He assumes what he heard in the news, but does not actually demonstrate it, despite all the evidence to the contrary.
And the planting of the tree. And we were discussing that evening, what is that tree dedicated? Is it dedicated to Christ or is it dedicated to a pagan entity? And how would we get rid of that tree out of the valley?
That tree needs to be uprooted.
Garden. That was a real discussion. But the Pachamamas, we didn't even know the word Pachamama, had not yet come into our vocabulary. That same day, I met a young man named Alexander Chugawel. He is a towering Austrian young man. He's 6 foot something.
I like that sword. I need that sword in my life.
I think 6'8". I can't recall. I met him and his wife, and he made a very good impression on me. We talked for a while. He was a convert to Catholicism. He was a traditional Latin Mass attender, and I think we exchanged information at some point. So that's sort of the origin story of it all. Shortly after that, I flew back to Texas on an airplane. And when I got back and my phone came back alive after being up in the air, my wife had texted me an image of a woman nursing what looked like a piglet. I'm not sure what kind of animal it is to this day, but it said in Spanish something like everything is connected. And it was a woman using her breast to nurse a animal, and that this image was placed in a church, St. Mary's across the bridge near Vatican City, along with these little statues.
And I wholeheartedly agree with Taylor Marshall, at least on the point that this is inappropriate. I think it's very inappropriate. I think it's in poor taste. I think it's also a little odd. Definitely don't think that it belonged there. I understand what they're trying to say is everything's connected. Okay, I get it, but you don't have to visualize it for me, especially in this particular way. And I understand that the little animal, its mother, had recently just been killed by the people in the village. And when they found out that the animal mother that was just killed had a child, the lady felt bad. And so she breastfed the little animal. And this is some wonderful little story about how we're all connected. And okay, come on, this is silly. So yeah, I'm not a fan of this. I think it's inappropriate. I don't think it belongs there. This does not equal Pachamama idolatry. There's a massive leap from that to from this thing here to Pachamama idolatry. But watch the leap that Marshall makes.
Of these women. And we learned that they were called the Pachamama. They're dedicated to the Pachamama, and the Vatican made a clarification.
Wait, who did you hear? From who did you hear that it was the Pachamama? You heard that from, first of all, Getty Images, and then a set of a contest. And then Catholic media started to promote that with no evidence, despite the actual facts that the ceremony itself calls it Our Lady of the Amazon. So when he says, we learned that it was, according to who? Who said it was? He just jumps on the claim that it's Pachamama without any reason to believe it. And now that Catholics push back on it and say, hold on, wait, Taylor, hold on now. Why should I believe that this is Pachamama? Oh, these Pope splainers. I'm glad that we're getting to him. Let's continue.
Of these women. And we learned that they were called the Pachamama. They're dedicated to the Pachamama. And the Vatican made a clarification that these statues, the Pachamamas, were not the Virgin Mary.
The Vatican did not make that clarification. The people who had spoke about the issue were not officially speaking on behalf of the Vatican. You see the misinformation here. Now, clearly he didn't check his facts before disseminating this information. He just thinks, well, a Vatican spokesman said, yeah, but they weren't authorized to speak on the issue. They were supposed to be speaking on the Synod. And even the people themselves admitted they didn't know what they're talking about. And again, this is all contrary to the actual facts of what the ceremony itself said.
Were not Christian saints. They were images of the indigenous deity Pachamama. Who was
actually, no, even the fumbling representatives there who spoke on what it was clearly said it was not anything pagan. But here he's saying, no, it was admitted that it's pagan. Wait, that's not what they said. They said it wasn't anything pagan.
It was a Mother Earth goddess in South America. Well, when I saw that image and I saw these Pachamamas, I immediately began to book a flight back. I wanted to go back to Rome, and we were going to remove the Pachamamas. Now,
and rip that tree out.
There's a bunch of other details in the next several days that I'm not at liberty to discuss. And perhaps one day when Pope Francis dies and goes to his Lord, I will be able to tell the entire saga of what happened in those days.
That's interesting. I wonder what he hasn't told us yet, because the things that he didn't tell us before contradicted things that he told us previously. So I wonder what else we're going to find out that is in discontinuity with what he told us. But anyways, okay. Let's watch it just a little bit more here.
But needless to say, plans did not work out. And I contacted the young, fiery Austrian, full of faith that I knew, and suggested, hey, if I can get you to Rome, can you get the Pachas out of our Catholic Church? They were
And rip that tree out.
actually on the altar in St. Mary's across on the Tiber River.
How dare they have the Virgin Mary on the altar?
Can you just get them out there? And we discussed whether to film it or not, and we decided it should be filmed so that people would know that it actually did happen, and no one at the Vatican could say it didn't happen, or they could say that it was criminals that stole them. We wanted it to be very clear that they were removed and why they were removed.
Well, it was an act of theft, in fairness.
And that we would remain anonymous. That was the deal. So Alexander and another Catholic man agreed to do that. I arranged to get the flights, and they flew into Rome. As you know, you've seen the famous video. The Pachamamas were rounded up. These vile idols.
Again, just assuming it's Pachamama, assuming it's idolatry. No actual evidence for this. Just, again, he bought into the narrative hook, line, and sinker, and continues to disseminate it with no evidence, and, again, contrary to the facts.
They're idols. Read Moses, read Jeremiah, read Ezekiel, read Daniel, read the minor prophets, read the book of Revelation.
Sounds like Protestants who will remind us of all this and say that we shouldn't be having images of the Virgin Mary or of Jesus or any of that. And they'll say, read Moses and read Exodus and read this and read that.
God is opposed to idolatries. It's the first commandment in the 10 Commandments.
You know who agrees with that? Pope Francis. He has said that over and over and over. He agrees idolatry is wrong, and the people at the Vatican Garden Ceremony did not engage in idolatry. He, again, just assumes what needs to be proven. What really just took place here is Alexander and associates stole some images of the Virgin Mary and threw it into the Tiber. Okay, congratulations.
He rounded up the Pachamamas. He went out on the bridge above the Tiber, right there by Castel Sant'Angelo, and threw them into the river. And that was it. That was the story. Then he sent me the video footage. I arranged it. I waited until they were wheels up and flying out of Rome, because I did not want, none of us wanted them to be detained or arrested in Rome. Once they were out, I released the footage.
Again, compare the account that he's giving here compared to what Alexander initially said in the original interview. Just compare the two stories.
And it was history. That was it. There was never a desire to make a publicity stunt. There was,
well, okay, but there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of desire to fact check things either.
Never a desire to grift. There was never a desire to make money off of it. It was, and I'm telling you this honestly.
But you did, though, right? I mean, donations did come in, though, right? They were sent to Alexander, and I imagine some people really appreciated Taylor for his involvement in the issue. So I imagine there was some money that was made, even if that wasn't the intention. And okay, but it was certainly raised due to a situation that isn't even accurate to begin with. This wasn't an idol.
It was an act of devotion and piety to Jesus Christ.
But not one of fact-checking and sincerity. Because if we were sincerely seeking the truth, we would have considered the fact that there was no evidence it was Pachamama. So there is that problem here.
And I have zero regrets to this day. I would do it again. I know Alexander would do it again.
That's a problem.
That's
a problem, because there should be a desire to seek the truth here if we serve the God in truth.
Happened. Now, people would say, well, why didn't you come clean from day one and say you were involved in it? I wanted to remain anonymous. I didn't want to take credit for it. In fact, a lot of time, some time passed before that came out. And it came out because I was doing an interview with Alexander live on this YouTube channel. And Alexander said it. He said, he didn't tell me he was going to do that. We didn't plan it. I didn't know it was going to happen. And we were on the spot live. And so I said, yeah.
And he spilled the beans. And then we heard a story that was completely at odds with what he had originally told us. That's the problem.
Was involved in the background of helping make it happen. And that's it. You never heard me say, therefore, send me some money, or therefore.
But they did ask for donations, though, right?
Join on my Patreon channel or anything like that. It's never been that way.
Okay. But they did ask for donations for Alexander, if I recall correctly. And that's fine. I mean, I assume there's no real intention here of they just did this to raise money. I don't think that is the intention. I could be wrong. I can't read their hearts, but I'm going to assume that's not the case. I'm going to give them the judgment of charity and just say that they thought that they were doing a good thing here. That's my perspective on it. Again, I could be wrong, but I'll give them the judgment of charity. But I will point out that there wasn't a sincere pursuit of the truth here, because if there was, he would know that what he's saying is false, because all of the facts and evidence show otherwise. Okay, so let's wrap it up here with the coming towards the end of the presentation. Okay, now, is the image appropriate? That is another question that needs to be addressed. Is this an appropriate depiction of the Virgin Mary? Well, depends on who you ask. Different cultures, different times, different places have different depictions of the Virgin Mary. Some say, I think this is inappropriate because she's bare-breasted. Okay, we'll take a look at some of these medieval paintings of the Virgin Mary bare-breasted. This one features also the Virgin Mary. Looks like some milk from her breast is being squirted into the saint's mouth. The lactation of Saint Bernard. Now, the people at the time, I'm sure, didn't see that as inappropriate. In fact, saints didn't see it as inappropriate at the time. I imagine people today, probably at least in America, I don't know, I can't speak for everybody who's watching here, but I imagine some people feel a little uncomfortable with some of these images. So again, it's going to be based on, culture, place, time period, setting. What is an appropriate depiction of the Virgin Mary? What is not? There's different views here, right? And so if you say, I think it's inappropriate, the fact that she was bare-breasted, okay. But just keep that in mind with some of the medieval paintings as well. And, there have been historically some other depictions of the Virgin Mary as actual Pachamama, like the pagan goddess Pachamama. The pagan goddess Pachamama is a mountain, depicted usually as a mountain. Let me show you. There have been some traditional depictions of the Virgin Mary as this Pachamama mountain. You can see it right here. This is obviously pre-conciliar. Good old Pope with his tiara. Here's the mountain Pachamama and the Virgin Mary as Pachamama. So you do actually have historically some depictions of the Virgin Mary as the pagan goddess Pachamama. There is that as well. So there are some interesting depictions of the Virgin Mary in church history. So is the image appropriate? We can have that debate, but but I would just ask people to be consistent on the point. If you think it's inappropriate, my question is, what do you think about some of these medieval paintings? Okay, so let's do a summary here. None of the participants of the ceremony believed they were worshiping an idol. The evidence is, in fact, to the contrary. No conclusive evidence that the ceremony was pagan was ever provided. None of the unofficial clarifications from the Vatican indicated that this was pagan. In fact, they're saying to the contrary. The critics were looking for something to criticize before the Synod began, and they found something in the ceremony. It was merely assumed by Catholic media that the ceremony was pagan idolatry. That was never substantiated. It was assumed right at the beginning. Little to no engagement with the facts was made with most in Catholic media. Catholic media, cardinals, bishops, priests, and theologians all assumed the ceremony was idolatrous and pontificated about the Vatican's alleged idolatry as if the matter were factual. And they continue to do so unto this day. And when people come back and question the narrative and say, hold on, we're seeing problems with the narrative. Oh, Pope splander. Few in Catholic media actively push back against the narrative at the time, with the exception, the best that I can tell, of where Peter is. Seems like that's actually how Where Peter Is became pretty popular, was by pushing back against the narrative. Mike Lewis has a few articles on it, and especially Pedro Gabriel. I don't see a whole lot of other people who are pushing back on it at the time. And sadly, unfortunately, I was one of the people who was duped and believed the false claims. What got me questioning it is when people pointed out that the ceremony itself says it's Our Lady of the Amazon. In conclusion, was the ceremony itself idolatrous? No. The evidence shows it was not. Was it scandalous? In some ways, yes. Not because of idolatry, but because it gave the appearance to the average person of idolatry. Now, in fairness, the average American walks into a Catholic church or even an Eastern Catholic church, sees all these icons and sees us prostrating the icons. They're going to think that we're idolaters. So, okay, look, there's only so much that we can accommodate people. However, this is not a liturgy. This is not, a divine liturgy or something like that. This was a ceremony that took place on the feast of St. Francis. And what could have happened here was this could have been explained better to avoid this appearance. So was it scandalous? Insofar as it gave the appearance of idolatry without proper explanation at the time. Was it confusing? Yes, it was confusing because proper explanation was not given for this at the time. Could the Vatican have done better? Yeah. Yeah, all around. Could have had a better explanation before the event of, okay, here's what this thing is. Here's what you're about to see. Here's a theological explanation of it. Here's some catechesis. There could have been more consistency in the explanation. Now, in fairness, there was no official explanation given by the Vatican, but at least if you guys are going to unofficially explain it, have some consistency. And at the very least, look into what you're commenting on. There could have been more awareness of what was going on in the media. Pope Francis admits, yeah, they weren't really aware. That's a legitimate criticism. Some were ready to find something to criticize, and they found it with the ceremony. The false claim that the image was Pachamama did not come from the ceremony itself, and the false narrative stuck due to endless media promotion of Vatican idolatry with no evidence and little to no engagement of the facts. Lastly, is the image appropriate? Debatable according to time, place, and culture. And that is it. That's the end of my presentation. I hope y'all found this helpful. You'll want to couple this video with that one that I did with Father Deacon Dragani about the truth of the Vatican Garden Ceremony. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. I'll also create a link to Reason and Theology where I'll have in the article an embedded PowerPoint presentation, the one that you've seen here, that will have all of the links to everything that I referred you to. You can go and watch it, check timestamps, check resources. I showed you most of it on the screen as we went through together, but for a few other things, I just said, hey, check it out at your own leisure. You can go and do it. But again, you'll want to couple this video with the one that Father Deacon Dragani and I did, because in that one, we go through the ceremony play by play, and we demonstrate that this thing was Catholic. Everybody there was Catholic. These rituals were Catholics. The gestures were Catholics. The songs and prayers were Catholic. There was nothing there that was pagan. And the image itself was Our Lady of the Amazon, according to the ceremony. So where is the Pachamama? Where's the paganism? It's not there. This is a narrative that was created after the fact by, it seems, both secular and Catholic media. They perpetuated the narrative, I hope unknowingly, and just because they were confused. The Vatican did a very, very poor job in explaining things because it never officially explained it. And the few people who spoke off the cuff with no information, didn't know what they were talking about, weren't officially clarifying, and then they were all over the place. There wasn't a fixed meaning surrounding the image with some of the other people surrounding the event, so they unintentionally caused some confusion. At the very least, though, they all agree it wasn't Pachamama, the pagan goddess, and there was no idolatry. There's at least that consistency. But the narrative continued. People took it to be fact after a while. And we've heard endless condemnations of the Vatican and its idolatry and its worship of Pachamama. And they continue the false narrative unto this day. And when people like myself question it, they just try to slander us and try to dismiss us and don't engage the actual issues. And it's once again thrown in our faces every single day for faithful Catholics who want to stand up and say, hey, I'm questioning the narrative of what you say about Pope Francis, but Pope Francis is an idolater, but Pachamama. That's the number one objection that I hear. So it's an issue, unfortunately, that lasts and endures to this very day. Again, Taylor Marshall was on his channel today talking about Pachamama and mocking Pope splainers. So some people were asking in the comment section, why are you talking about Pachamama again? Because they are talking about Pachamama again. And this is all they do is talk about Pachamama. They never stop talking about Pachamama. And when they stop talking about Pachamama and they stop promoting the narrative, then Catholics who defend Holy Mother Church won't have to talk about Pachamama anymore. But until then, as long as they continue to disseminate fake news and false accusations, faithful Catholics are going to have to respond. So what I try to do, in addition to the video that we've already done with Father Dragani, what I try to do, and this one is try to give you an idea of how this artificial scandal was created and how it endures unto this day. Hopefully that has given you some clarity on how it came about, and also highlights some of the problematic figures that we were seeing at the time who are continuing to create problems in the Catholic Church today. And just as they were buying into false narratives then and disseminating false information against Holy Mother Church then, some of those figures are doing the exact same thing today with unsubstantiated claims contrary to the facts and evidence, promoting Catholic dissent in the Catholic Church, and so on. All right. Hey, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. And if you want to support Reason and Theology and what is taking place here and help the channel grow to reach more people, best way to do it is hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, comment there in the show notes. That all helps with the algorithm and reaching new people. But also check the Patreon account out at patreon.com/Reason and Theology. Extra content there for patrons, but you'll be supporting the show so it can reach new people with information that they most likely aren't going to hear in most other places. So please consider doing that, or the GoFundMe or PayPal link there in the show notes. Pray for all of the people who have been deceived by this false information, these false accusations. You don't know how many people were prevented from coming to the Catholic Church because they think that the Vatican and the Pope worshiped an idol. So many Protestants said, I'm not going to become Catholic because of this. And a lot of Catholics left the Catholic Church because of this. And some people will not consider coming back to the Catholic Church because of this. This has impacted real souls in their eternal lives. So please pray for all the people who have been deceived by these lies that we Catholics, unfortunately, have promoted. All right. We'll see you later. God bless. Are you a Catholic thinking about converting to Eastern Orthodoxy? Or are you a Protestant discerning whether or not to become Catholic or Eastern Orthodox? If so, I have the book just for you. It's called Answering Orthodoxy. It engages all of the arguments that Eastern Orthodox use against the Catholic Church. I respond to all of them. I show that they are in error, and in fact, they're inconsistent, because the things that Orthodox are objecting to are in fact found in their own tradition. So the fullness of the faith can only be found in the Catholic Church. Check out the book right now at shop.catholic.com for your copy today.